Hey guys, welcome back. This week starts off a trilogy of videos for what some people would say is one of the best trilogies of games ever released. That being the Super Star Wars trilogy for the Super Nintendo. And to get things going, we're of course starting off with Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, I was a huge Star Wars fan as a kid, like most kids were back then. And I've got a ton of nostalgia for these games, so I'm going to try my best not to just completely gush all over them. And after going back and playing through all 3 of these games again, I can assure you that there's definitely gonna be some criticism. But no matter what bad stuff I say about them, I really think these are some great Star Wars games. They just maybe haven't aged as well as we would have hoped for. Anyway, let's just get things rolling with the first game in the trilogy, and the only one that I hadn't even seen before the game was released. Super Star Wars for the Super NES ended up being the way that I experienced Episode 4 for the first time. And you know what? I kind of preferred it that way. But first, let's go back in time a little bit, more so than we already are, because this right here is the very first Star Wars game that I ever played. And if you can't tell, this is The Empire Strikes Back on the Atari 2600. And the first time that I played this, I don't even think I knew what Star Wars was since I was only like 5 years old. But I still had fun flying around these weird snowy landscapes and shooting down these strange walker things. I had no idea what they were, but just going by the front of the cartridge, I mean, they look pretty cool. The game itself is super simple since you basically just shoot the walkers until they explode while trying to aim for their weak spots when they pop up. It's easier said than done since your ship's physics is slippery as all hell, but it's not bad. What it did do though was actually just get me interested in what Star Wars was, to the point where I'd make sure that I watched the movies whenever they were on TV, and after that I was hooked. So as simple as it was, I can at least say that this game right here made me a Star Wars fan. And speaking of those movies, growing up in the 80s, I could usually count on Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi being on TV fairly regularly. But for whatever reason, the first movie, Episode 4, seemed to be MIA for whatever reason. So I never actually saw that one, and really never felt like I needed to since I already knew how the rest of the story went thanks to Empire and Jedi. At least until I started to see advertisements for this all-new Super Nintendo trilogy of games based on the movies. Starting, of course, with Episode 4. And after seeing those pictures with these awesome graphics, complete with these crazy looking vehicle stages, I figured, you know what, maybe I have been missing out on that first movie.
Star Wars.
It was so hyped up that this was actually one of the very rare games that my video store got 2 whole copies in to rent. So you can bet that I grabbed it up as soon as I saw one of them available. And after all the hype, I couldn't wait to see what LucasArts could do with a proper Star Wars game on the all-powerful Super Nintendo. So let's see if this one lived up to the hype and was also a good introduction to the Star Wars movie for people like me that had never seen it. And right from the start, this game knows how to tell a story, recreating tons of full scenes from the movie into cutscenes that play out between the stages. And for as basic as they are, they do such a good job of hitting the main story beats of the movie that it really feels like you're moving through the story as you play the game. Which, as we covered previously in our movie games that don't suck video, that didn't happen too often. Usually, games would, at best, loosely follow the movie, or at worst, just completely ignore it. Super Star Wars definitely adds its own flourishes here and there by adding locations and enemies that weren't in the movie, but it's close enough that it all seems like this is just stuff the characters did in between the scenes. And I think this is actually one of the best things about the game. It also doesn't hurt that, for the time, this is a fantastic looking Star Wars game. Everything about the film and more has been carried over into the game. It's not going for a super realistic look or anything like that, instead going for a more stylized look that suits the Super NES better than just trying to digitize everything. While some of it can look a bit basic and barely anything has more than like 2 frames of animation to it, I still don't think you can mistake this for anything but Star Wars. Especially when you're climbing all the way to the top of a sandcrawler making your way through the Mos Eisley spaceport, and finally fighting your way out of the Death Star. There's a sort of timeless look to this game that the sequels would vastly improve on, but for the here and now, it's a damn good looking game, and we haven't even talked about the vehicle levels yet. But don't worry, we'll get to those in just a minute. And the attention to detail carries over into the audio side of things as well, since the sound and music are just fantastic. And really, this is true for all of the games in this trilogy. The developers seemed to spend a good deal of effort making sure everything sounded pitch perfect. From the iconic Jawa scream to the Sand People doing that horrible war cry thing that they love to do, it's all here and it sounds exactly like the movie. And I guess it should, since LucasArts had full access to Skywalker sound, the studio responsible for all that stuff that you hear in the actual movies. But if there's one complaint that I have with it, it's that I wish there could have just been a little bit more variety, especially after hearing dozens of Tusken Raiders just going ham through an entire level. But what's here is really good. Even John Williams' compositions have all been stuffed into a Super Nintendo cartridge, and it sounds surprisingly good. While the graphics, story, and sound absolutely do a great job of turning Star Wars into a video game, the gameplay itself is just a little bit mixed. At its core, Super Star Wars is an action platformer. You're essentially blasting and jumping your way through all of these stages without much else happening. The gunplay is pretty solid, with your blaster being able to shoot in any direction, though this is one of those weird games where you have to freeze in place whenever you want to shoot. You'd think that might slow the game down a little bit, but honestly, it works pretty well, and it's not too annoying. What is annoying though is just trying to make your way through some of these stages. Your character doesn't feel too bad running around when they're on solid ground, but as soon as you leave the ground, you better start hoping for the Force to take the wheel. Because both your normal jump and your high jump that you can do by holding up on the D-pad kind of feels floaty to the point where you're in the air for much longer than you think you should be. And it doesn't help that just about everything in this game will push your character around if it touches you, like literally everything. Flying enemies push you across the screen. Weapons shove you off platforms, and even debris from enemies you've already killed shove you around like a 4th grade bully. So combine all of that with an iffy jump, and you're going to be missing a lot of platforms in this game. Which wouldn't be too bad, except that a lot of these levels loves to put in long platforming sections. Especially the now infamous Sandcrawler stage, where you have to jump all the way to the top of this thing while Jawas, turrets, and flamethrowers all want to push you back down to the bottom every single time you jump. It can be maddening, especially since this is one of those games where enemies will just respawn endlessly. And maybe if these levels were a little shorter, it wouldn't be too bad to deal with. But unfortunately, they just seem to go on for like 2 or 3 times longer than they need to. Repeating things over and over to the point of just kind of getting annoyed with it. Like how after you get your lightsaber for the first time, you fight this bantha. And I mean, this is pretty cool. It's a bantha and it explodes. But I guess a developer was like, yeah, that bantha was really cool, but wouldn't it be even cooler if they had to fight that bantha 3 more times in a row? And that's exactly how a lot of these stages in this game feels. There is at least a good amount of variety in those stages, but whatever variety they have quickly wears thin when they repeat the same sections and obstacles 15 times over before you even get to beat the level. The game does let you run around those levels with 3 characters that you get to choose from once you hit Mos Eisley. Of course, you start the game with Luke, who has his basic blaster that can be upgraded as you collect blaster power-ups, with each upgrade being surprisingly different. But as soon as you collect the next upgrade, you just kind of toss it. I kind of wish you could have just been able to choose which upgrade you wanted to use, but oh well. A few levels in though, Luke does get his lightsaber, which is, as expected, a ton of fun, especially when you do his contra flip with his saber just mowing through everything around him. Han and Chewie are a little less exciting though, only having upgraded blasters when you pick them, with no real advantages to using them over Luke. Except for maybe Han having this super sweet no-look shot whenever he shoots into the air. Still though, it is cool that you get the option to choose which character you want to play as at all in this game. The bosses sitting at the end of each stage are all impressively large, but unfortunately these are literally just battles of attrition. And this is another thing that kind of just carries through all three of these games. There's hardly any strategy here besides taking a few shots, dodging, and then just hoping for the best. The real highlight to a lot of these bosses though is how the developers reached into the lore and backstory for some of them. Like I remember everyone flipping out that the Cantina boss is a real version of one of those holographic game pieces that you saw in the Millennium Falcon. And yeah, while that is neat, actually fighting him is more just like a wet fart than anything else. Thankfully, the vehicle stages really shine though. While the speeder stages are cool, where you get to fly around Tatooine and blast Jawas on your way to Mos Eisley, it was the attack on the Death Star and the trench run that really stole the show here. Flying around the Death Star and blowing up towers and TIE fighters was exactly what I wanted to do in a Star Wars game as a kid. It kind of looks like a mess these days and you can only sort of fly forward, but it's still fun. And the trench run that came right after that level was, oh man, it was something. Putting you right into the cockpit of Luke's X-Wing as you make your way down the narrow trench, fighting Vader as the final boss, even though he just kind of sits in front of you, and then firing your torpedoes into the exhaust port right as Obi-Wan tells you to use the Force. These two stages alone really made you feel like you jumped right into the movie. So kudos to the developers for getting them picture perfect for the most part, at least as good as you could on the Super Nintendo. Overall, Super Star Wars ended up being a really important game for me on the Super Nintendo. This was the one that really got me obsessed with how well movies could be translated into a video game, since if done well, could effectively make you feel like you're playing an interactive movie. Yes, even a side-scroller like this. And as mentioned earlier, I had never even seen or knew the plot of Episode 4 until I played this game. In fact, when I was finally able to watch the movie one night when my dad rented it, I was kind of disappointed. The game had done such a good job of letting you play the movie's plot, and honestly making it a lot more exciting for a 12-year-old kid than what the movie was. Of course, as I grew up, I had more of an appreciation for the original film, but I can't deny that at the time, I liked Super Star Wars the game more than the actual movie. And thanks to this game, even though I had already seen Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I couldn't wait to see what kind of games those two movies could be turned into as well. And thankfully, I didn't have to wait too long for an answer. And I think that's going to do it for this week, guys, because we got a whole lot more Star Wars to go, with of course Super Empire Strikes Back coming next week. But before we get going with the rest of the games, let me know in the comments if you had played these, and if you did, which was your favorite? Maybe let me know so I can just go ahead and prepare myself for all the comments in the next two videos telling me how wrong I am. And while you're at it, be sure to give this video a like if you had fun watching it, or maybe even a sub if you liked Super Star Wars as much as I did back in the day. But I think that's all the Star Wars I can handle this week. Be sure to check back next week when we see if Super Empire Strikes Back is as good of a sequel as the movie was. Until then though, thanks for watching.